Sure. When I started playing guitar around 1966, 67, I was a drummer already. And I had a great band. We played Beatles songs and we were having a ball. And I was the singer, one of the singers. And I really loved that. I didn't really feel like I needed to move to another instrument, but I kept hearing songs in my head and I couldn't explain them on the drums. So I finally taught myself to play guitar. The story behind that is I had mononucleosis. I was in junior in high school, and they said, you have to sit down now for 2 months. You can't do any drumming, no activity. You have to sit still. You can't go to school. You'll be tutored. Ooh, what am I going to do for 2 whole months here? You know, I'll go out of my gourd. So I borrowed a guitar from one of the guys in the band, and I literally said, that's the note I want to hear. Let's see, the harmony. Oh, okay, so those 2 notes do. And that's how I figured it out. Now, around that time, or a year or so later, you had Jimi Hendrix, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Eric Clapton. The big guitar gods of the 60s exploded on the scene. And all of a sudden, guitar was a lot more than just writing songs. It was about all this amazing stuff you could do with guitar. And suddenly there were, feedback and all kinds of wonderful sounds coming out of the guitar at the hands of those masters. And so I wanted in on that. So then I started trying to learn what they did. And I literally sat and listened to everything on their records and figured out everything I could possibly glean from that. And I did that for many years. If you're going to educate yourself, it's not something you can do quickly. And somewhere in the mid-70s, I realized, well, now I can pretty much do a pretty comparable imitation of Jimmy or Jeff or Eric, but they already did it. So what am I supposed to do? And that's when I figured that what I should do is anytime I catch myself playing, a Hendrix lick, just try to substitute it for something of your own, something you'd play. And that was quite a process, It was a discipline to do that. But over time, what I discovered was that I liked messing with the sound of guitars, making it sound like things, scratching your cheek with it or something, or making it sound like a car horn, or something like that, or seagulls flying over. And I realized, well, not many people seem to be interested in that. Maybe I'll go that direction. So I would be playing a guitar solo and suddenly I'd put in, the sound of an elephant. Woo! And that kind of gave me my own little space in time and helped me find my own voice. When I joined Frank's band after he auditioned me, I really had learned everything myself. I was completely autodidact. I taught myself everything. Just listening to records. I had no idea what I was doing, no technique. I didn't know how to play an odd time signature. Really just played like I heard other guys play. And so what Frank did for me, he gave me what I consider to be a college crash course, the School of Zappa. In 1 year, very, very thorough and difficult year, he brought me up to speed. I learned 5 hours of Frank Zappa's material. We rehearsed 5 days a week in a large, full production film studio for 3 whole months before we ever played a note for anyone. And on the weekends, I would go and stay with Frank over the weekends so he could show me what was coming up the next week, because I was the one guy in the band who didn't read music. The other guys would get music on Monday and they could just read the charts, but not me. So I virtually lived with Frank and his family for 3 months before we ever went out on tour. But I think more importantly than just the musical part of it, which came naturally to me, was his ability to kind of tell me everything you need to know about being a professional touring, recording musician. I mean, kind of the bare bones, the lifestyle, how you do this thing, how do you survive out there? How do you, naturally Frank took me on my first tour of the world, and you learn everything on the go. We even made a film together called Baby Snakes, and all that information given to me for free by Frank Zappa is priceless, and I will always remember him for that. the King Crimson legacy that I've been a part of, I would have never guessed I would ever be in King Crimson. When I was a starving young musician, that was a band that I loved. I listened to King Crimson with headphones on and just thought, man, these guys, I just loved the level of their music, the integrity of it. It seemed to me like the Beatles had gone another step further in their musical careers and become even better musicians, at least. So I knew all the early King Crimson stuff very well. I knew all those records from 1969 all the way through, from Court of the Crimson King all the way through to Red. It was a great surprise to me to find myself in that band all of a sudden in 1981, many years later, when Robert Fripp and Bill Bruford invited me to join. And at first it was a bit of a identity crisis. You know, gee, what do we do here? I was being asked to be the singer, the front man, the co-guitarist to Robert Fripp, something that had never happened before, the lyricist, you know, in a way, a big part of the creation of what music you decide to play. And I knew the history of King Crimson very well, so I wanted to be very careful not to mess with it and not to disappoint. So it took me a while, a couple of months, to really lock into the new direction. But before I knew it, I realized we're not the old King Crimson. You know, we're going a whole different way here. In some ways, it was inevitable because, it's a 1980s band. It's not the 60s. It's not 69 anymore. But also, I think it's inevitable because we had so much new technology. You had Bill Bruford, was the first guy I ever saw with electronic drums. Tony Levin, the first guy I ever saw with a stick. Me and Robert Fripp, the first guys I ever knew of with guitar synthesizers. So, we had this whole new vocabulary to work out, and that's what we did. And we created, without really even realizing it, we created a new version of King Crimson. And I think that first record, Discipline, our first honeymoon record together is what we call it, still really stands the test of time. It's unique, and I think maybe inspirational for some others, I hope.